Okay. Well, thanks for coming. Okay, we have all English speakers. How well is our English? Yeah, no, yours are good. Yours is good. Okay.
It's good. It's good.
It is good. Okay, and you did very well in translating this morning. Thank you. Wow, impressed. Where are we from here? We are from the U.S. Who is from the U.S. here originally? 2, 3. Right. Have a fellow Kiwi here.
New Zealand?
I'm dual, so I'm a Kiwi. I'll be a Kiwi today, and I'm a U.S. citizen, a Kiwi.
Your name, Lee?
I'm something, whatever.
Where are you originally from?
I grew up in Texas, but I've been in New Zealand for the last 18 years. Yeah.
What part of Texas?
The Dallas area is where I come from, south of Dallas. Yeah.
I'm from Katy.
Oh, really?
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. All right. Well, I know we have an English man here. England from
Birmingham, England.
From Birmingham, England. Right. Where else are we from? Philippines? Sorry? Philippines.
Ted's from Burma.
From Burma. From Myanmar.
He's just kidding.
From Philippines. So how many Filipinos we have from Philippines? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8? That count right? Where else? Anybody else? Who else? Thailand. Okay, you come to the English class, huh? Siamese. Yeah. From Thailand. Okay, very good.
This is better than mine.
Yeah, where are you from? You have an accent.
Atlanta.
You're Atlanta. Yeah, I can tell you have an accent.
The Thais have a hard time understanding me.
Yeah, I do too.
Southern accent.
You have a real southern.
Like you from Muskogee? Is that Louisiana?
No, that's Oklahoma. Okie and Okie. Okay, thanks for coming. I guess you didn't have a choice either in this class or the Thai class upstairs. All right, we're in John chapter 13 today. If you want to do our class here, we'll try to finish at noon, not 3:30. We're going to look at verses 31 through 36. That's where our text is this morning. All right. Facebook, I think, is an amazing tool. All right, a social media tool. Now, is everyone in here is on Facebook? Do we have anyone not on Facebook in here? You're not on Facebook? Wow, I'm impressed. Facebook, I think, is an amazing social media tool, and one thing that I really appreciate about Facebook is through that I've been able to connect with, again, after 35, maybe not quite 35 years, some of my high school classmates that I haven't seen for so long, and all of a sudden through Facebook, wow, and we've even got together and spent some time together. It's been such a wonderful thing for that reason. Facebook, when you have Facebook, they're not called acquaintances. On Facebook, who are the people, what are they called on Facebook? People you're connected with. Friends, right? Facebook friends. Okay. All right, we're going to do a little contest here. How many friends do you have on Facebook?
He's the winner.
You're the winner. Okay. You have 0. You have how many?
Ask him how many accounts he has first.
How many what?
Accounts.
Oh, you have a lot of aliases, huh?
10 as far as I can remember. Well, one of
10.
my... Yeah,
10 accounts. Okay. All right.
10. I use it for
How many Facebook friends do you have?
personal friends. I think I have like 1,000.
1,000?
Those who I know.
Okay. Those who you know are Facebook friends. Do you have anyone there as your friend that you don't know?
I have, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I have a few of those. Anyone beat 1,000?
Whoa.
How many do you have, Gary?
I'm not sure. It's a lot. I'm close. It's like 1,800.
And all of those you know?
They're sometimes like they're people like I basically know them. Sometimes
Basically.
You're my friend now. So like we've only just seen that.
That's
you know,
right.
So.
Okay, that's right. We're friends. We're friends. Facebook just brings people together, doesn't it? Well, but are Facebook friends really friends? Really? I mean, maybe our definition of friendship is very broad, very basic. Maybe it's watered down. We're going to talk about friendship today from John chapter 13. Friendship, even though the word friend is not mentioned here, the theme is present in John chapter 13. Now, how would you describe a true friend? What would be the characteristics of a true friend? I love you.
Trustworthy.
Trustworthy. Okay. Pardon my English writing.
Can you depend on?
Okay, dependable.
I guess the deepest would be dying for you as well.
Okay, dying for you. That will come up.
Spend time together.
All right.
You can be real with a friend.
Sorry.
You can get real with a friend.
Okay, you can get.
You no matter what.
Sorry.
They'll accept you no matter
Non-judgmental.
Okay.
Care what happens to you.
What now?
They care what happens to you.
They care what happens to you. Okay, anyone else? That's a pretty good list there. I like to have friends like that.
what. Accepts who you are.
Accepts who you are, okay. That's probably similar to non-judgmental. All right. We can add, I'm sure, to the list. In the Gospel of John, the word friend is never used, but it is a theme in the Gospel of John. And I think in the Gospel of John, or for Jesus anyway, friendship is the ultimate relationship with God and with one another. Okay, it's the ultimate relationship with God and with one another. So we're just going to look at, well, we're going to look at a few texts, but this is going to be our main text, John chapter 13. And then we may be familiar with at least some part of the text. We're going to read verses 31 through 38. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him." Excuse me, I'm in the wrong spot. We're going to start in verse 18. Where am I at? No, let's start in verse 21, actually. Sorry, let's just start in verse 21. All right. After saying this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and declared, "Very truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he was speaking. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him and to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So while reclining next to Judas, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." So when he had dipped a piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. After he received the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, "Do quickly what you're going to do." Now, no one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the common purse, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the festival," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little while longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answered, where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow me afterward. And Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. Jesus answered, will you lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the cock crows, you will have denied me 3 times. All right. In this text we've read, we have a betrayer, and we have a denier, and we have a friend. And I think the heart of this text, of course, is found in the words of Jesus. We probably are familiar with them, verse 34 and verse 35, when he says, a new commandment I give you, that you should love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. And if you have this kind of love, he says, and by this all men will know that you are my disciples, if this is the kind of love that you have. And so the heart of this text here, this loving one another, stands in direct contrast to what Judas embodies and what Peter promises. We'll find out they're empty words at the moment. And so what Jesus says stands in contrast to these other 2 characters here. Now Judas is past redemption. All right, Satan enters him, he goes out, he is past redemption. And Peter's friendship will be tested and he'll fail. We know that. He will fail. So in the Gospel of John here, I know I keep using the word friendship. I will show you how it's relating to friendship or how it is a theme of friendship. But discipleship is a call to friendship here in the Gospel. Discipleship is a call to friendship. So the call to follow Jesus is a call to be a friend like Jesus. Because it says, love as I have loved you. Right, okay. In this last discourse here, before Jesus is arrested and horribly executed on a Roman cross, here he is eating with a betrayer and a denier. I don't know if you noticed this, but Judas does not speak. He has no words. In fact, in the Gospel of John, he only speaks once. All right, but here he has no words. And he goes out into the night to betray because he's filled with Satan. But Peter speaks. He speaks quite a bit, and he makes great promises to Jesus. Promises of friendship. But of course, we know a little bit later he ends up denying that he even knows Jesus. And so between the actions of the betrayer and the words of the denier, we have Jesus telling the disciples to be friends as he has been a friend to them. And so he gives them this command to love one another. Now look at John chapter 15 for just a moment, because this goes along with it. The same evening, the same discourse, the same context. In John chapter 15, verses 12 through 15, he reiterates this command to love, but he adds to it. He says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father." Now he says here, you are my friends if you do what I command you. And so what has Jesus just commanded? Love one another. So we're Jesus' friends if we love one another. If we're not careful, I think our minds will shift toward, if we're not careful about thinking what Jesus says here, we're Jesus friends if we love Jesus, but that's not what he says. Now, that might be true. We're friends of Jesus if we love one another. All right? So just take note of that. And I think, going back to John, these words here and then in chapter 13, 34, and 35. So these may be the most radical words in all the Gospel of John. The most radical words of all. Because it claims that the love that enabled him, that is Jesus, to lay down his life for us or for his friends, is not just particularly supposed to be unique to him, because he says, if you're my friends, if you do what I command, and that is to love one another, and there's no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends. So laying down your life is not just something unique to Jesus. He expects his followers to have that level of love or that level of friendship. That's been mentioned here. There. So I think maybe Jesus' words challenge us to re-examine our understanding of friendship, or our understanding of Jesus as a friend, as our friend, and what that means. And for Jesus, the mark of friendship is not what Jesus does for us. We sing words about Jesus' friendship to us in terms of what Jesus does for us. He listens to me. He walks with me. He is sorrowful when I am sorrowful. He hears my prayers. He listens, and that's all true. But here, the mark of friendship is not what Jesus does for us, but what we do for him. And that is to love one another. That's to love one another. So just think about that for a moment. Our relationship to Jesus as a friend is really dependent on our relationship to one another. All right? We can't claim friendship with Jesus without friendship to one another.
My wife is Thai, and she's not a Christian, but she comes to church here with me every Sunday. And where I met her in Baghdad, she always came to church with me there. But even when I moved here, whenever she told me, she said, you guys, she meant Westerners. She meant Americans or Brits, or, she grouped me in that category. Whenever she said, you guys do this, you guys do that. One day, it switched. She said, we were talking about the church. She said, you guys take care of your people. You go visit. We were talking, I think there was some people here that they had said something about going to visit an older person or someone in the hospital. It switched. I was grouped as a Christian versus non-Christian. And I think that's what made it real for me is, yes, the Thai church, I'm part of this Thai church now. Even though I'm still a Westerner, the bigger group is the Christians. You guys go take care of the sick. You guys go visit the older people. And I think it illustrates what you're talking
That's
about.
exactly, yeah. Good. Thank you. That's exactly. People recognize that. There's a level of relationship that normally doesn't exist in the world, really. And Jesus says, if you have the kind of love that I have for you, the world will know that you're my disciples. You belong to Jesus. Friendship. Let's talk about friendship. I want to talk about friendship briefly in the Greco-Roman world, because the way the friendship was defined in that day and age is different than the way we define. Now, these are not foreign to the way friendship is defined, but let me just quickly define friendship in the Greco-Roman world. First of all, it was a key social relationship. Friendship to us generally tends to be sentimental. And a lot of these are sentimental. Okay? That's fine. That's the way we define friendship. In the ancient Greco-Roman world, it wasn't maybe primarily sentimental. It probably did involve sentiment, of course, but it wasn't primarily sentimental. There were three aspects to friendship in the Greco-Roman world. I'm going to just write them down. And you can read the writings I'll be quoting Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, who uses these words. That's one of the characteristics of friendship in the ancient Greco-Roman world. Okay, there we go. In the ancient Greco-Roman world, those are the characteristics of friendship, how they understood friendship. Laying aside one's life. In fact, Aristotle said this, and he lived about 400 years before Christ, I believe. He says, the virtuous man's conduct, having virtue is a chief goal or aim. A virtuous man's conduct is often guided by the interest of his friends and his country, and he will, if necessary, lay down his life for his friends. So it says the truly virtuous man, his conduct will be guided not just by his interest, but by his friend's interest. That is, he will conduct himself in a way that will be in the interest of his friends. And if the interest of his friends is that he has to save his friend's life, he will forfeit his life for the sake of his friend. That's friendship. But also friendship is boldness of speech and action. True friends, and I think this was mentioned, you can get real, you can share with them, you can open up, you can tell them. And it's not so much telling them what's going on with you, but telling them everything they need to hear, or not holding anything back from them. There's no secrets between friends, but boldness of speech and action. And thirdly, friends have all things in common. Now, in Acts chapter 4, 32 and following, somewhere around there, I can't remember the exact verse, Luke, in describing sort of the church there, he uses this language actually here, that the church, there was no one in need, they all had everything in common. That's the language of friendship. Friends share, and they have all things in common. In fact, a Greek proverb, there are two Greek proverbs. Among friends, all things are in common. And I think it was Aristotle who said that friends are really two bodies and with one heart. They're one soul. They have one heart. Even though there may be two persons, there's one heart. So friends have all things in common. So this is the language of friendship in the ancient Greco-Roman world. This is the characteristic of friendship in the ancient Greco-Roman world. If you read the Gospel of John, this chapter we've just read, 14, 15, 16, John uses this language here. So he's talking about friendship. Even though he doesn't use the word friend all the time, he's talking about friendship. And we've already talked about, in our world, friends spend time together, all these things here we've mentioned here. Friends play together. Friends go on holidays together. But normally, when we think of friendship, we normally don't think of laying down one's life. Now, truly good friends may, and that's been done before, but we normally don't think of friendship in those terms. But in the ancient world, a true friend was one who did that. All right. Friends have all things in common. Let's just look at a few texts here. When we look at what's going on in John chapter 13, 14, 15, and 16, the Father, Son, and the Spirit are mentioned several times there. And so this aspect of having all things in common is seen in the relationship between the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. Look at John chapter 16 in just a moment. I better get out my... Okay. Verse 14 and verse 15. Would someone like to read those verses for us?
14 and 15.
14 and 15, yes, thanks.
He will glorify me, for he will take of what is mine and declare it to you. All things that the Father has are mine. Therefore I said that he will take of mine and declare it to you.
Good. So that's the Father, Son, the Spirit. They have all things in common. All things in common is what is being said here. All that the Father has is mine. We have a phrase in this, I don't know, in Texas anyway, I don't know where else it's at. Mi casa, su casa. My house is your house. This is the same idea. Mi casa, su casa. My house is your house. So friends have everything in common. So this aspect of friendship describes the relationship between the Father, Son, and the Spirit. So the Father, Son, and the Spirit, they're a community of friends. They're a community of friends because they have all things in common. The disciples, Jesus speaks of the disciples in this way too. John chapter 17, 21 and 22. Would someone like to read those two verses for us? 21 and 22.
John 17, 21, 22.
Mhm.
All of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me, I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me.
In verse 22.
Oh, Father, I
That's
have
okay.
given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one.
The idea of oneness there. Have all things in common. True friends have one heart. There's a sense of unity, of oneness there. That's the language of friendship that Jesus is using here in John 17 to refer to the disciples. So the disciples are brought into this circle of friends. It's not just the Father, Son, and the Spirit, but the disciples too become part of this circle of friendship. And I think that's significant. So this friendship between the Father, Son, and the Spirit is extended to the disciples, and so they too belong to this community of friends. All right, Jesus, he also speaks openly with his disciples. There's a boldness of speech here. Look at John chapter 15. And someone like to read verse 15. We've already, I think, read this once.
No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you.
All right, he's held nothing back. Everything he's learned from this Father, he's told them. He's told them. He's shared with them. He's open with them. He has held nothing back. And so this outpouring of knowledge then is an act of friendship. It reveals that, yes, these are my friends. These are my friends. And so through his speech, his talk to them, they've become his friends. And so now, because they're his friends that have been brought in the circle of friends, they can speak openly to God themselves. They can be bold in their speech to God and tell God everything. All right? All right, so the language of friendship is used here in these texts here. So friends have all things in common. Friends don't hold anything back. Their boldness in their speech and their actions, they share everything. And then lastly, that they will lay aside their life. Laying aside or laying down one's life for their friends. We read that already in John 15. So Jesus asked his disciples then to live life like he does. Live life the way he has lived life. To be the kind of friend that he has been. Jesus has already been doing this. This is not just a reference to his literal death on the cross, which hasn't happened yet, but his whole life, his whole ministry, he's been laying aside his life for his disciples. His conduct has been toward the interest of his disciples. That's laying aside your life. So where does he act this friendship out? Well, earlier in chapter 13, the foot washing incident, that's an example of laying aside one's life. We're not going to look at that. We're going to go back to John chapter 10 for just a moment. In John chapter 10, beginning in verse 1, I think here's an example here of him illustrating laying aside one's life. He says, "Now truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate but claims in by another way is a thief and a bandit. Now just remember the word thief, okay? The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. And then he talks about himself as being the door of the gate to the sheepfold, where the sheep come in to have protection and security and all of that. So he says that in verse 7. Very crudely, I tell you, I'm the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them, as I am the gate. And then verse 11, he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. So he says, I'm the good shepherd, because the good shepherd will lay down his life for the sheep. And this is an accurate picture of shepherding. All right? A good shepherd would protect his flock. He would lay down his life for a sheep. The hireling, of course, will just run away. He has no interest. He has no stake in that. So here he's talking about himself. He's talking about himself being a true friend. Being a true friend. Now look at John chapter 18. Keep this in mind, John chapter 18, because I think John chapter 18 here echoes John chapter 10, what he says in John chapter 10. It echoes. All right, so John chapter 18, Jesus is in the garden now. All right, he's in the garden. He and the disciples were in the garden. Says, after Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, because Jesus often met there with his disciples. And so Jesus leads his disciples into an enclosed area. This garden, an enclosed area like the sheep pen. He leads them there. All right? So that recalls this sheepfold, which we read in John chapter 10. And just like in John chapter 10, there's a thief in the garden, so there is a thief in this garden, because the thief in this garden is who? Who's the thief in this garden in John chapter 18? Sorry? Judas. Yes, he's a thief. He's not called a thief here, but in John chapter 12 and verse 6, he is specifically called a thief. He's called a thief. So there's a thief in this garden. But what does Jesus do here? How does he lay aside his life here? There's a thief in the garden that is after the sheep. Look at what it says here. Jesus comes up to him. Verse 3 and verse 4. We're not going to read all of this. He says, who are you looking for? Verse 4. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked them, who are you looking for? They said, Jesus of Nazareth. He says, I am. And so what Jesus does here, he puts himself forward between himself and the disciples. All right, he comes forward, and so he is protecting his disciples here. So he goes forward to meet Jesus, and so he deprives the thief of any access to the sheep. He's laying aside his life. He's being a friend to his disciples. And so Jesus, doing this, chooses the ultimate act of friendship, because, yes, this will lead to his death on the cross, and he dies, of course, on behalf of his friends, on behalf of us. You know, we're talking about this person, Dr. Kent Brantley, I think is the name. He illustrates this. I think it's a wonderful illustration of willing to lay down one's life. I mean, by going over there and to, of course he protected himself, but putting himself in harm's way in that way. And also, not only did he, go right in the middle of all of what's going on over there, there's a story also going on that there was some kind of dose of some medicine that was to be given to help, and it was going to be given to him, but he said, could you give it to Nancy, the other American that contracted Ebola? So this one dose of medicine that could help him, he said, give it to her. That's being a friend. That's being a friend. It illustrates that. So, Jesus' death is an act of friendship. I know we normally think of Jesus' death as a sacrifice. You know, he died in our place, but it's an act of friendship in the Gospel of John. We need to read John's account of Jesus' death as an act of friendship. Jesus is laying aside his life for you and for me, and in doing that, he's being a friend. His conduct is in our best interest. And so to see Jesus' death as an act of friendship enables his followers to experience the fullness of God's love, the fullness of God's love in his death. And as I said before, the word friend, interestingly, is never used as a title to refer to Jesus. There's all kinds of titles in the Gospel of John for Jesus. Just read John chapter 1. He's called the Lamb of God. He's called Rabbi. He's called the King. He's called the Messiah. There's all these titles to Jesus. But never friend. But he's described as a friend. John doesn't have to use the word friend, but to use this language here, and you know, his disciples would automatically know he's talking about Jesus as a friend. He acts out friendship. And so Jesus' gift of his life for others, that defines friendship and love. Now, that's our model for community, for how we ought to relate to one another. Here we go. This is the model of friendship. In the body of Christ, in the community of disciples that call Jesus Lord and call Jesus friend, this is the kind of friendship he calls us to be. Being this kind of friend is not necessarily an easy thing. You know, we struggle with it because too often in the church, we struggle with one another, you know. But true friendship, this is the ideal in the community of believers. In the community of believers, we have all things in common that we can share with each other and open up and not hold anything back. All right? And then that we're willing to, even if it comes to it, give our life for the other. That's true friendship. That's the call on our lives as followers of Jesus. That's not always easy. But that's the nature of friendship. Right. That's the lesson. Does anyone have any last comments?